Deep State is James B. Stewart's 10th book. He is a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter who has worked for the Wall Street Journal, is now a columnist for the New York Times. In Deep State, James B. Stewart delivers a kind of bountiful harvest of important scoops that we've come to expect from his investigative journalism, including the names of the two members of the Trump cabinet who Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein believed would be in favor of invoking the 25th Amendment to remove Donald Trump from the presidency. For that and more, we turn to James B. Stewart, who joins us for his first cable news interview about Deep State. And, it's very hard for a book that you've spent a couple of years with to land dead center in today's news and yesterday's news with what we saw Senator Johnson doing on Meet the Press. Can you explain to the audience what Senator Johnson was trying to do on Meet the Press?
Well, he's done what I've explored in Deep State, and which I think is so terribly destructive to the democratic institutions of this country, which is to attack the law enforcement agency of the United States, the Department of Justice, the FBI, the traditionally independent investigative and judicial branches of government, and accuse them essentially of being filled with traitors and spies and being part of a deep state that is trying to protect its own powers and eject a democratically elected president to preserve those powers. And that is so far from the truth. I mean, as you see in the pages of Deep State, there is, in a sense, a deep state in this country. There is a very large bureaucracy that is sworn to uphold the Constitution and to protect the people of the United States. They do not work for the White House. And when the White House violates the Constitution or does not act in the interest of the people of the United States, then it is their obligation to step forward and investigate that. And as we've now seen with the whistleblower, it's the obligation of a whistleblower also to come forward with information that needs to be investigated.
So Attorney General William Barr is flying around the world trying to do what your book does. He is trying to figure out, how did the investigation of Russian interference start? How did what became the investigation of Donald Trump by Robert Mueller, how did that all start? It's all right here. He could save a lot of time in the sky.
And taxpayer money, I might add. God only knows how much this is costing.
Was it started by FBI officials prejudiced against Donald Trump? Was that the animating force in starting that investigation?
Absolutely not. The last thing they wanted was to have to investigate another candidate for president. They were already investigating Hillary Clinton, which put them in an extremely awkward and uncomfortable position. Now, for the first time in history, they were forced to investigate the other candidate as well, both at the same time. They didn't want to do that. And by the way, they didn't begin an investigation of Donald Trump himself. This is a very important point that I think many people don't realize. He was not the subject of the investigation until he recklessly and impulsively fired James Comey and then lied about the reasons for it. That is what caused Trump himself to become the subject of an obstruction investigation. Some of his campaign workers were subjects of investigation, but Trump himself was not. And by the way, it did not begin with the salacious Steele dossier either. The FBI people, and I've talked to many of them, they didn't put much store in it. And I've read it very carefully as well. It has no what you would call actionable intelligence. It didn't say, oh, they'll be meeting next month to have further discussions of this, or they're plotting another release of faked tapes of the president so that they could perhaps insinuate that, disrupt it, wire people, get further. No, it's all stuff that happened in the past. It's very odd, although some of it does ring true. That wasn't the basis for it. And even the Australian ambassador, now, Trump has been trying to enlist the Australians, cajoling them, threatening Barr's talking to the Australians, trying to say, oh, what really was going on there. I mean, the Australians, they're one of the closest allies of the United States in the intelligence community. The Australians got the information that the Russians had hacked emails from Hillary Clinton. They didn't do anything about it until it actually became demonstrably true that, yes, these things did exist. And only then did they bring this to the attention of U.S. intelligence agents. And it was perfectly responsible and appropriate, and reluctantly, the FBI plunged into this.
This book is filled with movie drama, dramatic movie scenes, including, you just mentioned, after James Comey was fired, Rod Rosenstein, in this book, is in tears with Andrew McCabe, says some extraordinary things